Hello, welcome. Well, thank you all for joining us here today at AVA Festival. We have a very special chat with two equally interesting individuals. Of course, many of you will be aware of Jeff Mills, a man who has pushed music forward and pioneered techno. But Guillaume Marmin is equally well regarded in his own field of light design. And today we're going to be talking about creativity, collaboration, but also the project Jeff and Guillaume are bringing together as close encounters of the fourth kind. There will be time for questions at the end, so if you've got any questions, keep them in your head, because we can talk about them in a bit. So, beginning, it feels like you guys are here to discuss and perform Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind. What is Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind?
It's a project that I had been trying to materialize for quite a few years. I was really impacted by the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind when I was a kid. And to me, that the film at the end was always very open-ended. So Richard Dreyfuss goes into the spacecraft, and then it kind of ends. And I had always remembered that it was always, when I was a kid, we always used to kind of debate what happened after that. Did he become one of the aliens? Did he go for an extended long trip? Did he come back like the other humans had been brought back in exchange for I'm not sure if you're familiar with the film, but it's a strange ending. And I thought that it could be interesting to try to create scenarios in an evening through music of these different ideas. That the music really plays more of a soundtrack for the atmosphere and the setting and what the people see and how much they see. And so the way it works is that the audience are the ones that are actually going into the spacecraft. And when you go in, you're not quite sure as to what's going to happen, but you have been abducted. You're in the control of the aliens, and they can do whatever they want to do. They can whatever. So it leaves the night open to many different things that can happen. So
Yeah, because I was researching online, and in UFOlogy, Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind is to do with alien abduction. Isn't that right?
well, it's actually of the fourth kind. Well, the third kind is having contact, but the fourth kind is actually somehow kind of merging with the alien itself. And there is a point at the end of the evening where that kind of happens. So yeah.
And of course, lighting is a massive part of this. And Guillaume, people might be a little bit less familiar with your work than Jeff's work. Can you just tell us, a little brief history about, who you are and what you do, and so people are aware?
Yes, excuse my broken English. I'm a French visual artist. I make installation and performance, and I work on the relationship between light and space and sound. Yeah, and Close Encounters of First Kind could be described maybe as a movie without dialogues. We use sounds and lights to create a kind of scenario.
Absolutely. And, before working with Jeff, what kind of work have you been doing? And, have you worked with music a lot before? Maybe you can tell us about some of your projects you've previously done.
Yes, I wish I was a musician, but I had to admit I'm too bad with music. So I try to work with musicians. I make scenography for live events and performance and installations, as I said, and there is always a strong relationship between sounds and visuals in my work. Yeah.
So you're a lighting designer. You're a musician. How do you guys get together? How do you become aware of each other's work?
Well, I think we were I think my manager knew you or knew of you and
yes,
yeah.
Pascal saw my work in Paris and proposed you to do something
Right.
together.
Yeah, I mean, I had been speaking to him about doing more collaborations with other type of artists. And so, yeah, when we got together, I mean, I'd had the idea prior to meeting, and then I explained to him the idea that maybe we can create something of a science fiction night with dancing and lighting, and try to make it more in a structure of story form.
Absolutely. And why do you think lighting is so important to the club experience or dance music experience?
Sorry, lighting?
Why do you think lighting is so important to this project and to the dance music experience? Like, what is it about lights that really works?
Maybe we wanted to create a new way of making music events and try to immerse the audience in a new experience. And light is very useful for this because we see the world with our eyes, and it's the most important sense. And if you change the light, you can change our perceptions of the world.
And why was it important for you to bring lights into the show?
Well, because for one, from what he said, I mean, it's something that you consume by the eyes, but actually goes directly. It's more impactful on the brain. So that old saying, "Seeing is believing." But there is also, I think as humans, we recognize a certain language that goes with the act of lights blinking off and on. I mean, the strobe light is a form of communication in itself. Seen and then not seen, or a strange effect on reality, because it's causing you to miss frames and through your eyes and then also in your brain. So this is what DJs know all the time, and it's an effect that many DJs have learned to be able to look through. So, you know, as an example, I mean, if there were a strobe light in here, your movements would be seemingly enhanced because the strobe light is blinking. But some DJs are trained to kind of look through that, to kind of block that out in their mind, to know exactly how much movement is actually really happening. So it's an effect that if used at the right time, if used matched with sound, can be even more descriptive of certain ideas and concepts. The easy part is seeing things and hearing sound. The difficult part is the opposite of that. So it takes you know, if used correctly, you can really make the experience much more impactful by strategically using lighting, which is the reason why I thought it would be so important for this concept.
Absolutely. And of course, this project relates to UFOs. Science fiction has been such an inspiration for you. Why does that continue to be an inspiration for your music?
Well, I mean, how much time do we?
We've got time.
Well, I mean, science fiction is really science for the average person who isn't a astrophysicist or you know, biologist or someone who's very, you know, academically far. It is you know, these are hunches about the future and reality and time, really from the average person's mind. And so that's why I think science fiction, you know, is so interesting. And sometimes we see science fiction actually becoming science, because sometimes what people sense is actually what things, you know, the reality of things. So so the genre is full of ideas and full of visions and full of theories and full of things that are in the back of our minds, and we somehow kind of play them out in terms in literature and films and things like that. And then also from a subconscious thing, I think that it 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 ha- it can address what we dream about as well. So the things that we are affected by, during the night hours, somehow comes out in the ways that we see what would happen if we were to colonize a planet and be stranded it for, so what would we do? What if we encountered this? What if we, and so so it's an interesting genre to work in.
Absolutely, and you're not the only artist that's been inspired by science fiction. There's artists like Lee Scratch Perry, Sun Ra, many artists. Do you see yourself as a connection with those kinds of artists, that have also worked with science fiction?
Well, I mean, I certainly know of all of them, but no. I mean, I try to tend to think much further as far as my brain can strain to try to imagine is where I try to continuously to so situations that happen beyond humanity are the type of things that I try to kind of stretch. It's difficult.
Can you give an example?
Well, I mean, one of the projects that I'm working on now is another classical piece called Lost in Space, and it is about being lost in space. So the audience is lost in the cosmos, and they don't know where they are. And in the process, they experience all these amazing, strange, bizarre things in space that actually happen. So mirages, things that appear to be there, but actually they're not. Or planets crashing into each other, or planet and the moon, like Earth and moon crashed in at one time. Stars that act like animals that nomadically travel throughout the space. Yeah, all these things happen, and I've kind of translated them into a classical score, which should be we should be ready by April of next year.
What does a moon crashing into a sun sound like?
Well, I think the moon would be consumed by the star before that would happen, but. But I mean, there is one composition where one planet crashes into a moon, and the way that I compose the track is that there's a build up to the climactic part where they crash, and then there's a very long tail that happens almost to the end of the composition. It's about 10 minutes long. But that's the dust and the debris of what happens from each of the planets crashing, and so it's, yeah.
So the music is based on science fact in a way.
It's based on science fact, and yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And Guillaume, is science fiction, UFOs, is that something that you were interested in before working with Jeff, or was this a new experience for you?
Yeah, of course. One interesting point with science fiction is that it comes from popular culture, pop culture. So it's easy to catch a lot of people with science fiction stories, but it's also touch very fundamental questions, like Jeff said. And yes, it helps you to think about what is upper humanity, what is the space, the time, the light, and a lot of things like that.
Absolutely. And, one of the things about science fiction, it's a very hopeful genre. It talks about, people perhaps, or it can also be dystopian as well, of course. I just wondered, what are the ideas from science fiction that you perhaps hope would come to reality one day,
Well, I mean, for sure, we're going to, in this century, we're going to be on other planets. That's for sure. What we'll do when we get there, I don't know. If we'll be able to, what are the chances of survival? But for sure, we will go. We're determined to go. I think too that we will begin to look at this planet differently if we can, if enough of us can go away from it to be able to look at it in perspective. And yeah, and I can, so colonizing other places, yeah, you know, the moon obviously will be someplace. We're attracted to water, so I can imagine. And time and space travel, the time to get there, will be lessened by the how advanced our technology will be. So when we say light years, well, that's now, but it could be that we may discover something in order to be able to get us there quicker.
Yeah, one thing I've found perhaps a new development in space travel is, for many years governments were doing it, whether it's NASA, but now it seems like rich individuals like Elon Musk are trying to put their own thing into space travel and space exploration. What do you think about that, about rich individuals trying to actually put their own stamp on exploration of space?
Well, I think yeah, I think that is very much in line with the evolution of humans and how we've evolved over the centuries. It gets complex, like it has always been complex, in terms of how you divide up territory and how you decide, who owns what and where those lines are drawn. But it's definitely going to happen. It's going to happen in this century. It's going to, and we're going to have to know more about what's happening in our inner atmosphere and also in space.
Fantastic. So you two can probably best answer this between yourselves. So how does your collaboration actually work day to day when you're planning this whole show out? Can you talk us through how that worked?
Is it a secret?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of Close Encounters, I mean, well, I made an outline of what should happen, and then sent that to Guillaume, and he we discussed how the lighting and could be in the sound, and then I sent sound samples.
We try to imagine a common story, but there is also a lot of part of improvisation. We have some kind of canvas, and in this there is place for improvisation, and especially Jeff really good feel the tension of the audience and play also with it.
And those sketches, were they things you did by hand or using computers?
No. I mean, I still don't use computer to create music.
Really?
No.
Why is that?
Because I still prefer to work on the machine itself. The older ones, the more analog pieces.
Yeah, like 909, etc.
Yeah, and well, yeah, because they were built to be standalone type of machines, and they have certain characters which are different from one another. When you piece them together, it's like you're kind of like piecing together a band, but they and so I tend to work in that.
So in a way, you think technology has sort of progressed far enough with those machines?
Well, I mean, for those that are musicians here, of course, you can still work on those machines, but the sequencing of that is different. I think it's important to take the time to think about what you've just done and what you need to do. So actually working on these machines takes longer. And in the process, I end up changing my mind 6 or 7 times. So with the computer, it was too quick. So I could make the composition too quickly, and then I move on to something else. So I actually purposely made it more difficult for me to compose music, but in the process, I'm thinking about what I'm actually doing. So I go to the kitchen, I go to the restroom, I go watch TV, I come back again. Sometimes the machine is so old that it loses the sequence. But that's just the way it is. So yeah.
So what you're saying is some pain and some hardship is good for the creative process sometimes.
Well, I think it's more like life. I think that some days it's raining, some days it's not. I think that when you're in the studio and you're creating for people, not other machines. So this idea of perfection is something that I think is kind of on the outer, barrier of where I think music is used in a more impactful way of communicating, I think. So I never want music to be perfect. I just want it to capture the moment. And if the moment isn't perfect, that's just, it is what it is. And so I don't use computer because I would prefer to use my 10 fingers. And if I needed 11 fingers, I just didn't have it. And so I have to find a way to use only 10. And as a result, I'm putting more of my character than actually the character of the software that makes the music. So, yeah.
Okay. And in the performance tonight, what equipment will you be using while you're performing? Can you talk us through that?
Well, I made a lot of music to be played, especially for tonight. So it's music that is part classical, part electronic, experimental, soundtrack, and a few other things. So.
And of course, you've worked with many famous musicians, classical musicians as well. What's the experience of working with a classical orchestra like compared to just working on your own with a 909? Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, most are kind of not scared, but they're kind of reluctant. Especially classical musicians are covering their ears before, when they meet me, they're covering their ears because they're so afraid of the the sound of electronic music is and so yeah, you find ways to find common links between what they do and what electronic musicians do. And you start from there, and then they realize that you're doing the same thing. It's just the method.
What are the common links between the two worlds?
Well, it helps when there's a subject. Classical musicians don't make music to make people dance, so forget about that. But if there's a subject that is that just ties everyone, a common purpose. So in the current case, say the last score that I did was about planets. Well, they of course know about Gustav Holst and all the many different versions of classical that have been made about the planets. So it's easy for them it's easy for classical musicians to understand what the objective is. And so the electronic parts and the classical parts are just addressing each element, each planet, and so it's easier to discuss. And then also I have to say that there isn't that much difference between or distance between the way electronic musicians and classical musicians work. Both are very focused, very methodical. Both deal in numerics, and in electronic music, especially conceptual, we try to, as best as we can, to translate the subject as much as possible, as close as possible. In classical, their objective is basically the same. Their job is to translate the composer's work and what he was thinking as close as possible. So when we get together, we're both working to do that.
What one of your projects do you think you're closest to perfectly translating a concept? Do you have one that you think, yeah, that really got the spirit of that idea I was trying to get across?
No, nothing. I can't.
Do
I
you
can't
think
of
you
anything.
get close, or?
It's hard to tell.
I mean,
I don't know.
you're dealing with ideas of alien abduction. Obviously, that's always going to be a leap of the imagination for the audience to get there.
Well, all I can say is that no, I mean, I can't really. I mean, but all I can say is that you make music. You make it from nothing, and you just put it out there the best way that you can, and after that point, you really don't know. So 100 people can say that they liked it, but perhaps maybe 300 people said, didn't like it, but they just didn't respond. You just don't know. It's just you just compose music and you release it with the idea that maybe it might be useful to someone at some point, and that's really about it. And if you sell enough, if you are lucky enough to get the money back to put out the next one, it's a good indication. It's a good sign, but it shouldn't determine. I don't think, and it doesn't happen to me. It shouldn't determine where I am in terms of how I am matched up against other composers and what they do, and if you are worse than or better than them. It's not. It's so far from that, actually, and also same for DJing. It's every night is completely different, and I make more mistakes than I actually would ever say, which I have always done that, and I don't think I've ever played a perfect DJ set. I don't think it's possible. Because I just don't know. So I do the best as I can. I make the music in the best way that I can. But after it leaves my studio, after it's pressed and packed up and gone to a retailer, I really don't know. And almost to the point now that in terms of my work, it stops there. So I just have a subject. I need to materialize it. Put all the information into it as much as I can, try to make it as impactful and as vivid and colorful as I can, and then let it go, and then turn to the next project and do it. It's not that exciting. I mean, I wish it were more exciting than that. I wish that I could say that that. I mean, I must have released, I don't know, maybe 50-something albums, and that I could name one that was a success, but I can't. I don't know how many records.
None of them have been a success.
I can't honestly say that I've made anything that was, including the bells. I don't know. I don't know how many copies we sold. We.
Are you talking about from a commercial standpoint here rather than a creative standpoint?
I don't know what my work does. I don't know. It's. I mean, I'm being honest. I really don't know. I mean, I think that people may like things, but the truth is that.
Is that something you worry about, whether people actually like it or not?
No. I've over time I've learned to put distance between people and.
So do you make music for you or?
No. I make music for it. So what I like is jazz, and jazz fusion. So that's what I like. But I understand that there's a need for a certain type of music in order for people to be able to use as a vehicle, as a device to understand something else. And so that's what I do with electronic music. So yeah, I mean, yeah, the truth, you just don't know. I mean, you don't, and the things that we think that we know in this industry, it's just, most of it's just fabrication.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've got some time for some audience questions now. But Guillaume, I just would like to ask you a question as well. This is one of your first collaborations in music. Has it inspired you to want to work more in music as well as light now? Do you feel like this will be an ongoing conversation with light and music for yourself?
I already made many collaboration with musicians, and I hope it will continue, and we will continue this project, of course. Yes, it's really interesting to to work on a more and more big event like this one, and to have the possibility to touch more and more public. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So, in terms of questions, I'd love to take some from the audience. Is there a microphone anywhere in the crowd, or are we just gonna have to shout? I don't know. Okay, shouting it is. Yeah, please. If has anyone got any questions? You there?
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure I'm missing a lot. Yeah, but I never felt that I needed to know and do everything. Again, I don't. I mean, I'm not. I was never interested in uh, the idea of matching myself up with other. I found my way about like in the mid '90s, and it had really nothing to do with anyone else. I mean, that was like really rave. That was, towards the end of the rave culture, and I uh, not a spiritual finding, but I realized that music can have much more purpose than just dancing around for hours and hours and hours. And I'm not a very religious person. In fact, I'm not religious at all. But I realized that you know like with myself when I was young and listening to music, if the right thing could be said at the right time to the right person under the right circumstances, you can really create a situation, yeah. And so I always so then I begin to have much more appreciation for um, uh, music and the things that I could do with it to my capacity. And I never got into trying to stay up with trends and technology and things like that. I mean, I've only built enough studio in order for me to do what I need to do, and slowly add things in and take things out. And I would prefer to learn how to modify those older pieces rather than try to buy something new, digital and things like that. So I never really talk about the technology part because there's really not much I can say. It's just there are other things in my studio and my surrounding that are more responsible for the way the music sounds. So I have lots of old magazines about the preparation for space travel in the mid 50s to mid 60s and the late 60s, like Life magazine, Newsweek, and all these type of. I collect these things because these were articles that were trying to convince the public that space travel was going to be good for them. And so there's certain wordings, there's certain pictures, there's certain, all these things were being brought upon the public. And in a way, I'm kind of the result of that. I was quite young, but I grew up really in the Apollo age. So I would prefer to have those type of things rather than try to stay more on the technology things that would influence me to do.
Fantastic. That was a great question. Unfortunately, I think we've only got time for one more. So, you, sir, over there.
Hi, Jeff. Do you have any advice for the next generation of emerging artists?
Yeah, I do. Mix everything as much as you can. Even if you don't even understand it. Mix everything. Take an apple and mix it with a pineapple. And just mix everything, every chance that you get. It's really one of the best ways that you're going to find and discover something new. And I'm convinced that we're really at the beginning of the century. I'm convinced that mixing or creating hybrids or creating different variations of things that once was will be the norm. So nothing will be as what was. I mean, I'm 50 something years old, and my window of influence goes back to like the late 70s and the early 80s, and for me, I'm stuck in a way in that time. I'm stuck in disco. It's hard for me to break out of the idea of the DJ over here and the dance floor here and the spinning lights above. So I have to really struggle to pull my mind out of that, and but for people that are younger, much younger than me, to grow up in an era where mixing is so common is going to be able to propel a lot of other things, not just music, but people themselves, or the way that they think, or the way that they think about everything around them, to think in millimeters, not inches. But so that's what I recommend. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. Jeff, Guillaume, that was super insightful. I'm sure we're all really excited for the performance tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Jeff Mills, Guillaume Marmin.
Thank you.